And so we're going to talk about monuments, and this is how it looked Saturday when I was out there. And we're going to talk about bricks. So I'll give you a second to look at those bricks. And we're also going to talk about Blue Moon ice cream. Anybody from Michigan? Hey, Tobin, welcome. I ended up taking a trip, and we'll talk about why I was over in Georgetown. But I ended up making a very productive trip because my daughter-in-law is from Michigan, and Blue Moon ice cream is apparently quite popular in Michigan. So I brought her a pint of Blue Moon ice cream. So anyway, this is what we're going to start talking about is the monument that stands out in front of the Williamson County Courthouse, about 16, 17 minutes from my home, and the county seat of the county in which I live. This monument has been standing since.
I'm having a little bit of trouble with the volume. Your volume could be better. All right.
Let's see if I can fix that.
That's great.
Is that better there?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, let me sit that close. But the monument was erected in 1916. It was funded. Actually, the fundraiser was done by the United Daughters of Confederacy. We're going to talk a little bit more about them as well. It has become very divisive and really probably, since it's probably just before I got here, 2017 or so, it was starting to create a stir, and there was a committee formed back in, I believe it was 17 before I got here, and then obviously with the justice system, the unrest associated with the justice system in the past year or so, it's gotten quite a bit more. But let us move on. The other part was the bricks, and so here's the bricks. I don't know if you get the story. There was a story. Let's back up. Georgetown also has an historical commission. Williamson County has a historical commission, and they have this nice arrangement they had a nice arrangement with the city of Georgetown. You have to understand how governments work sometimes, because the county square, the square in the center of Georgetown, where the county seat is, the House of Justice, is county property, all the way the whole square, except for the sidewalk, which is owned by Georgetown. So the County Historical Society had this agreement with the city of Georgetown to lay down these pavers. And in about the last year or so is when the Confederate pavers started to show up, and they were commemorating. There's several of them in here. Let's see if I can get to them fairly quickly. I may not. Maybe so. But there are other pavers. Can you see that? There's obviously veterans from many different wars, in fact, all different wars, and there's historical people. And they had rules and guidelines, being not much more than has to be somewhat associated with there we go. I'm sorry, with Williamson County, and they had but it was really unwritten. So the city of Georgetown actually laid these bricks down under the direction, and it was a fundraiser for Williamson County. And so that's kind of, in the last week, two things have happened associated with anti-racism in Georgia. One is the city council of Georgetown met, and they decided to remove the bricks, all the bricks, every brick that has anybody's name on it. So, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to go to this first query. And Tobin, let's see, they should be in there, the links and everything. So the first query that I have.
No, they're not in there.
If I came on after you put them in there, they won't show up.
Okay, all right.
You can just repost them.
Yeah,
let's see if I can. I may have done something wrong here. just a second. Let's get over here to here. It says everyone. All right, let's just do the queries because they're at the bottom. I shouldn't have done it that way. So the first query is let's just talk about this for a minute. What should be done with monuments like this? This is 21 feet tall. It's about, I think, 1.5 feet shorter
There's
than
nothing in my chat.
Yeah, there's no, it's not
Nothing in
showing
my
up.
chat either. No, nothing
Right.
there.
All right. Well, the first
Hit-
query,
Hit enter again or submit or something and see if you can resubmit it.
ooh, that's probably what it is because it's showing there. Let's see.
Hit enter.
There
Yeah,
we
there
you
we go.
go. Now we have them.
So sorry.
Okay.
This is why I don't host typically. But anyway, so the first query is pretty simple. Let's just think about what, as our anti-racism awareness wearing those hats, what should we do with these monuments? What should happen with them?
It might help if we were clear about what we mean by monuments, meaning monuments to the Confederate Army, the veterans, or any monuments.
Good point. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah. And what does it say on there and what's it to?
That is to the Confederate soldiers, all branches of the Confederate Army. It has emblazoned in that statue that was created by McNeil Marble Works in Georgia. There's an emblazoned Confederate flag in there. It is facing typically of Confederate monuments throughout the South, or throughout the country for that matter. It faces south. It's very clearly a monument to the Confederacy. No ifs, ands, or buts.
And it was erected when?
In 1916 by the United Daughters of Confederacy.
Right. Great.
So thoughts? I mean, it's not an easy answer. I mean, well, the easy answer is take it down or leave it up, but that's not good enough.
Well, I don't think it's that complicated, Chip. I think the Confederate States of America were illegal. The war was, a horrible thing that was initiated because they seceded, and then for whatever 70 years, the big lie spread by the Daughters of the Confederacy, et cetera, have tried to paint it over and make it sound like Dixie was the closest thing to Eden as possible. So the only clear parallel I see is denazification after World War II. I think every single monument and every single reference to the Confederacy should be removed. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you want to put it in a museum, fine, but it has no place in public, none of them, whether they're in the North or the South.
Right.
Which is not to say that it shouldn't be taught in our history books as realistically as it should be, to represent what happened both during the war and then in the Jim Crow area and the after effects in the 1900s. But I agree, I can't see why people, citizens of Georgetown who are not of the persuasion for the Confederacy, should have to have that monument standing in front of their public building.
On the other hand, when I hear about William Penn's statues being taken down because William Penn was a slave owner, I have some question about statues in general. I've never liked statues because I think they personify, usually personify people who've won battles, or male heroes, neglecting female people. But then, I mean, I do think that the Confederate statues, which are a form of idolatry and worship, need to come down. But maybe all statues are a form of idolatry and worship, and, you know, they represent something that we don't want to preserve, especially when they represent somebody who won lots of battles in war,
Right.
male,
But I think-
female, or otherwise.
But I think there is a big distinction, Liz, between the tendency to want to only have statues to the perfect, like William Penn's a good example, but even George Washington or Lincoln, the statue where he's got the slave reaching up to him, et cetera, and monuments to the Confederacy. We've only had one rebellion that cost 500,000 lives.
Mhm.
And that's a single case. Other things can be, discussed on their merits, and we have to somehow decide at some point whether, and I think you raise a good point, do we need heroes in stone, or should they be living people and inspiration in other ways? But I think it's very clear to me, and I don't see how anyone can say our founding fathers were slave owners. Yeah, they were, absolutely. And it was horrible, but they didn't start a war that killed 500,000 Americans. And glorifying that war in any way, shape, or form, it seems to me is the same as, why don't we see any statues of Goering or Hitler in Germany?
Mhm.
That would be ludicrous, wouldn't it?
Mhm.
Absolutely. It's a great point. I should see the share screen again. I mean, in this group of people sits Shelby Little, Colonel Shelby Little, who I know. I've sat down on several Saturdays. In fact, this may be him right here with the hat on, but I've sat right there with him just to talk to him.
Mhm.
If you walk by and you see the table here, you'll see the tables that talk about how Lincoln was not all that he was purported to be, and there's actually the bottom line is perpetuation of the lie. This is it in front of you. But these are also people. These are people. And part of the reason that I've gone down and sat with Shelby Little is because he's still a person. So maybe what we do with them is clear. How we do it is not always as clear to me, because the people that do rever that statue they're still people. And there's been many Saturdays I've been out there where there's megaphones. Let's see if I have the other picture. If you were able to pan over to the right, that's where the activists are sitting. That's where I would sit. We're gathering petitions. It's gotten quite belligerent between the two groups, and that's what hurts me going out. In fact, I'll kind of stop there. That's why I went out Saturday. I wanted to see the effect of two things. One is the change in the BRIC program, and the second is the essay that was written by Dr. Trombley, the president of Southwestern University.
That was very good, yeah.
It was very good. And I'll tell you, Southwestern University, I don't like to use analogies, so I won't, but they had some very deep involvement in that statue's presence.
Oh, yeah.
In Georgetown.
And
So-
that brings to mind Zach's comment in the chat about changing the people's minds is different than removing statues. And going out to speak with, to treat people as humans and with respect and dignity, even when they have opposing views, is one step towards addressing their mindset. Just like we would resist changing our mindset, there are ways where we can get to recognize each other as people.
That's a great point, Tobin, too, because it does come down to, to me, conversation. Sometimes you have to have the conversation, even if it's not easy. And believe me, when I'm sitting there talking to Colonel Shelby Little, and he's telling me that the Civil War, obviously he's telling me the cause of the Civil War had very little to do with slavery. It's like, Shelby, we're going to have to just agree to disagree from this point forward. So it is hard, but you have to have the conversation, and somehow and I'm not sure how it is, the statue does represent something important to somebody, and that, to me, that fact can't be cast off just for no reason, without consideration for me. But anyway,
But
let's see.
but Chip, usually we have a part of this meeting that is sharing how personally we have been affected by racism in the last month. We've skipped over that. But
Hmm.
I recognize that this whole issue around the statue has really been one of the things that's most changed you. And I think that is the significance for me, and that you are also trying to change other people, and I think therefore the statue can be very useful, whether it's there or it's not there. Okay, so I always see the process as more important than the results, whatever they are. The process may be more important. Maybe more important to talk about the statute than to take it down.
There is a group, if you're not familiar with the braverangels.org group, they have tremendous number of events, activities, both nationally and locally in this area. And several of them relate to race and race relations and the discordant kind of conversations, but how to bring people together to talk about it. The one thing they focus on is the goal is not to change somebody's mind. The goal is to relate to them and to express your views and to hear their views and to keep that process, as Liz talked about it, going rather than seeking an outcome that one wins, one loses, or anything like that.
Such a good point. And Liz, your point too is good. There's been times I've gone down and spoken to commissioners court and at the courthouse, and there was one time I told them I was actually grateful to the UDC for placing the statue there, because at some point in the future, we'll have some level of, I'm not sure I can say it would ever be unity in the city of Georgetown or Williamson County, but there would be enough people that would finally say this is enough and we're going to take it down peacefully and maybe respectfully, in some manner that respected the people that still enjoyed it. But those are great points. But yeah, so we can certainly talk about racism as it affects each of us. I was going to go through a little bit.
I didn't want to stop you, Chip. I just
Okay.
wanted to say that stuck out for me as the main reason to talk about all of this.
Yes.
Is that, why do you talk about statues and taking down statues? In order to respectfully move people along in the understanding of what is really a real evil
Nope.
in our society. Not evil people, but an evil, which is the idea that some people are, because of the color of their skin, should have been enslaved or couldn't. And the more important question is, there's a states' rights question too. States' rights versus federal rights, and who gets to say, how do we make the decision as to how we run our government? Do we run our government in small little units, which can more discriminate against people, or do we do a federal way of running our social world as well as our actual government? Yes. So I think that's what the end argument is about in our country right now. But that's jumping in. But I want to see what you had prepared. So.
All right, well, let's see. I was going to go on, let's see, let me share screen again here. This is, so ultimately last week, it's all on video and I've watched it. I didn't go, but last week the city of Georgetown, again, the owners of the sidewalk where the pavers are, and Tobin, I'm not sure if you were here when we mentioned pavers. Did you?
Yeah, I
Okay.
got that. Mhm.
All right, so this was actually, it wasn't last week, was it? It was almost 2 weeks ago. Didn't seem right. Yeah, this may have been their agenda, I suppose, because I was pretty sure it was last week was the meeting. But this was their decision, and can maybe Tobin, can you read the item summary there?
Sure. Williamson County Historical Commission created the Memorial Brick Program, which was established to recognize and honor persons, organizations, and events related to military service, ancestral heritage, or historical significance, and that are in some manner associated with modern citizens of Georgetown and Williamson County. That this program has been in existence for a few decades, where the city of Georgetown helped in the installation of the memorial bricks. In 2021, the city realized we did not have a formal agreement with the Williamson County Historical Commission, WCHC. This presentation walks through the WCHC's proposed draft agreement and asks council for direction on the terms of the agreement.
So thank you, Tobin. So that was the agenda item, and let's see. Yes, this is what. Let's see. Is this it? No. It was in there. So the bottom line is they presented overview of the BRIC program. And let's back up. In 2021, they realized there was no formal agreement when the Confederate pavers started to show up. That's when they agreed. That's when and why they agreed that, or they realized that. So they ultimately, the decision was there were 260 pavers. Of those, maybe 20 roughly had Confederacy. They were Confederate icons or iconography. They memorialized somebody or a battle. Uh, um, did the city council of Georgetown do enough? They basically, all bricks are gone. Is that the right decision?
Did they get any public input first, Chip? Did they have some hearings and ask for people's opinions?
Yes, they did, and this link, I believe, is in there. So the presentation is, you should be able to get to it in there, and there was. So they had this person in here, Mira Cantu, was the assistant to the city manager, so she's a Georgetown employee. She was working with the Williamson County Historical Commission. They put together a presentation. And then during that presentation, it was open to the public. So the commission themselves spoke, as well as members of the public. Several people that I know spoke. The only people that I saw speak were in favor of removing the Confederate pavers only, Confederate pavers only. So right now, all the Vietnam War veterans, World War I and II veterans, they're all now in the back of a pickup truck somewhere, or they were given to the people who purchased them. Oh, by the way, I purchased 4 bricks. They were all, I found what I believe to be the last 2 people that were sold into slavery in Williamson County. I found their names, and I made bricks for them. They were never placed. But they were historical people. They were absolutely historical people, and the records came from the archive of Williamson County, so they were authentic. So anyway, but the bricks went back, and I'll just tell you that bothers me a little bit. Not with Liz, that I think anytime you memorialize heroes associated with conflict, that there's always 2 sides in some case, and to me it's either way, but still nonetheless, to pull up some of the other veterans does bother me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a clear case of throwing the baby out with the bath. They didn't, it sounds to me like they had one hearing and took a vote then with input instead of giving time for people to suggest options and alternatives. And it also sounds like they were cowardly politicians, and rather than say, well, we don't believe the Confederate things should be there and we'll remove those, they decided, well, this way we can't be blamed, we'll throw everything out. It's a very cowardly approach.
It does make me wonder why they put in ancestral heritage. That almost calls for that kind of
Right.
response to me.
Yes. Let's see if I can get back over here. Yes, here was this was actually the page out of the Georgetown government thing. And so it has a link, and this link is in there. It has a link to watch the whole thing. And it went on for well over an hour. It was kind of a mess.
Well, did the administrative people recommend removing all the bricks, or was that the commissioners who said, well, we can't come to any conclusion, we'll get rid of all of them?
I was actually watching the end of this just as Meeting for Worship was starting, so I kind of missed the very end. But there was one of the city councilmen was quite outspoken that. And he was pretty eloquent in what he was presenting to remove all of the bricks. That was what he recommended.
So it came from the council, not the people, with the
Yes.
historical commission. Okay.
Yes, and I can tell you, I mean, the first time I sat down with Mr. Little was after this whole deal on the brick program, and after I had sent him the money, he said, he sent me a letter back saying they had. The city council has suspended it for now. Would you like me to send back? I said, no, just hold on to it. Let's see what happens with it. And that was the first time that I went down and sat with him. And when we talked about the brick program, he made it very clear he would be seeking legal recourse if they didn't allow the Confederate bricks, but allowed other veterans bricks. So I think, Steve, you're right. They don't want to go through that. That's why the statue's still there. Anyway, go ahead.
One of the things that my Quakerism, at least, includes is a sense that memorials are really not appropriate. I even have a hard time with our memorial wall, to tell you the truth. Early Quakers are buried with no gravestones at all. And then the habit in the New World became sometimes small gravestones in the 19th century, ones that are flat to the ground. But certainly memorials were rejected, and it's one of the things that attracted me to Quakerism in general. Now, part of my reason for that is that memorials divide us in death by caste very often. I mean, mausoleums are for rich people, and wretched little graves with wooden, crosses on them are for poorer people. Among Christians, and so that also, bothers me. So any of this stuff really gets me from that point, from my Quaker sensibilities. But that's not a reason to ask other people not to do that, I guess. I won't, and never have provided a brick for anything. Not because I've contributed money, but said I don't want a brick. And I totally reject what happens at most universities and colleges, which is everything gets named for somebody because that's how they raise the money to build it.
Right.
And I'll tell you, Brandeis is one of the worst. I mean, the toilets are labeled. I swear the toilets dolls look like golden bread. That isn't true, Fred. But, but it's, you know, it seems like that's that, and that's my alma mater. So one of my alma maters. So just, you know, it's I have a rejection of all of that.
It seems to me that one way to approach the discussion with somebody from the other side is to ask them, how is this monument important to you? And have them share their intense feeling of the value and power and message that it represents. And then to ask, so how do you think it might impact somebody who was on the other side of that issue, like somebody who was a slave during that time? And just see if they begin to understand that it has power for them, but also a lot of power for those who it represents a very different message for.
Oh, and that's a great point. Jaquita Wilson was one of the people who spoke at the city council meeting, and she said that, you know, absolutely the monument keeps many members of the Black community, which she's a part of, away from shopping on that beautiful square, and it is a beautiful square with some great shops. So yeah, good points.
I think Glenn has been wanting to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry, Glenna.
I wondered when you were talking about the monument and what to do with it, what other communities have done with monuments. If they've gone into museums, and who decided?
I'll tell you, it's kind of a mismatch. I can tell you. Lockhart has recently removed theirs. I'm not sure where it went. The one still stands in Bell County, just north of us. Still stands there. Llano still has theirs, but a lot of them have become secretive. You know, some of them they talk about giving back to the UDC or giving to the Sons of Confederate Veterans to do what they want, not in public view.
Right.
Some are going to museums. The one in Georgetown, unfortunately, it's one of the biggest ones in a town the size of Georgetown in all of Texas. And Texas has second only to Virginia, which is where I grew up, on the number of memorials, let's say, because it's not just monuments. We're talking streets, schools, parks, all of it. Virginia wins and Texas is number 2. But this is a big monument, and it will not go in the Georgetown Museum. It won't fit there.
Okay, it's too big.
Yes.
And then there's also UT has made some moves on that, and our own Texas government ended up commissioning a marvelous memorial to the history of African Americans in Texas. It's a way of contextualizing it so that if you're going to memorialize the Confederate Rangers that on the front of the Capitol lawn, they also have done the African Americans and the Mexican American Hispanic traditions as well. So they've sort of thought, well, let's put some memorials up to
There you go.
traditions.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always, in some cases, the balancing memorials or the balancing plaques can be very offensive. The one in Georgetown is. There's a balancing plaque there. It's to, those of you that are from Texas know is it Alfred Moody? Is that his name? He was once the governor. It's Moody.
Moody, but I don't remember. I don't think it's Alfred, but anyway, yeah, Moody.
Yeah, yes, it's Moody. Anyway, he's got a smaller, it's about the size of a person, bust on there, and he made it there because he was the first lawyer, I guess, or maybe he was district attorney by that point, that tried and convicted some members of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, there's 2 things about that. One is Moody was very well documented as a terrible racist, and number 2, the the trial was for members of the Ku Klux Klan that tarred and feathered another white guy.
Ah,
So he's the balancing statue in Georgetown. But anyway, I can go down the path. Are y'all familiar with the Southern Poverty Law Center's whose heritage is it anyway? That document.
No,
Not that
Let's-
document.
Yeah, let's just put it up real quick. I'm not going to spend much time in it here. Let's see, share screen, boom, boom. That should do it. So there's this document, and it is worth reading, and the link should be in the chat. This was a document that they wrote, basically talking about these memorials, and let's get down here. Bear with me. Let's get to there. You know, it kind of starts here, and they talk about all these different memorials. They talk about it's a really good document to read. It's worth going through. You know, let's just kind of flip through here. I want to get down to right here, this one. So this just to show you. So I think, what is it, over 2,000. So in the United States, I'm sorry, live things, because these aren't all in the United States. There's 723 monuments, 741 roadways, 201 schools, 51 buildings, 38 parks. There's actually one monument a school is named after a Confederate general in Puerto Rico.
Mhm.
Mm,
So, you know, just something to think about, and we can talk about it or not, but, you know, so I'll just say, where do we stop? So these are all zero?
Yeah.
That's probably the right answer.
yeah, it is.
Yeah. And
The process is essential, however, otherwise you get education school board members kicked off in the liberal city of San Francisco because they've spent so much time on renaming and not on things that their parents were concerned about. So how you go about it, if your goal is to try and address this issue in a way that gets results, you have to be very careful on how you approach it.
such a good point.
hey, Maine has 0.
There you go.
Uh-huh.
Well, it is interesting to me, you know, it is very interesting. So even up here in Minnesota, Montana, Washington, Oregon, I told my daughter where there's a couple, she wouldn't go to see them, but, you know, a lot of racism certainly didn't stop in the Confederate States. That's an indication of that. And it's like I say, when you look at the big map, there's actually there's some in South America. There's a community, I think, in Argentina, where they left. But this was here. But that was, and let's see, that other map is here. So this one you can get to through the Southern Poverty Law Center, and you can actually go in, and if you're really wanting to dig into what these are, you can find out right here. Go ahead, Liz.
There might be a really good reason why Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont have no statues.
They have
And
no
that is
flags.
there are no African American people in
Exactly.
those states. And
Practically.
never have been. I mean, incredibly few.
Right.
And never have been, and they've never been a threat. So, you know, we just don't have that
Yeah.
that social need to have the,
Yeah.
you know.
If I may belabor the monument thing just for one more minute, it seems to me any Confederate monument or memorial that's in front of a courthouse should be removed tout de suite, because that's clearly stating that justice is for white people.
That's right.
Mhm.
Then we can go
Yep.
from there, but those should be removed, period.
Yeah.
Schools
It is-
being named for a particular general, you know, those are not as urgent, but monuments in front of justice and government buildings, state capitals and justice buildings, they just should not be there, period.
It does seem funny that the people who rebelled against the government are the ones that are celebrated in front of the government buildings.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it does. Those are fantastic points. And I'll tell you, Liz, your point is a good one too, because I always have to remember, you know, as as freed African Americans started to migrate to the north, they weren't very well received.
Oh, no.
So, you know, again, I have to remind myself again, I was born in New Jersey, and I don't tell everybody that, but I grew up in Virginia, and I say that as a joke, but, you know, the racism didn't stop at the Mason-Dixon line.
No.
It really
No.
didn't.
Definitely not.
Well,
Hey, Joanna.
I just have always, the whole situation with Mexico, Mexican Americans and
Oh,
Texas,
yeah.
has been one that was illuminated for me when my son was 6 years old. And at Cambridge Friends School, he did a massive report on the Alamo. And then we came down to visit with Terry. At that point, we were just friends, Terry and I. And his son and my son, we all went down to San Antonio because Sam desperately wanted to celebrate the Alamo. And this is coming from something at Cambridge Friends School. So, you know, when you realize it just takes a long time to, you know, and Terry would not go anywhere near the Alamo. Having been brought up in Texas, his reaction, he had a piece of the truth at that point that not, you know, out of his own 6-year-old education. Yeah, I mean, it's when he was little that they taught stuff that he just no longer believed in. So you know, we just need to keep educating ourselves and others about the things that we celebrate, and they're really have a background of violence and hate, and that's not stuff we should be celebrating.
As someone whose several great grandfathers has a painting hanging in the Alamo Chapel because he was the last guy out of the Alamo to get help and didn't make it back in time. I grew up, you know, with this connection to the Alamo. My relative was there, and only much later did I realize why the Texians were rebelling against Mexico, because they had the no slavery rule.
Right.
So they wanted to keep their slaves, and that's what brought about the conflict, and that's why we went in there and took all that land from Mexico, because they were getting in our way. So it is a complicated picture, especially when we have the Confederate flag emblazoned on our Capitol building as one of the 6 flags of Texas. That ain't going to disappear. We have to address the different historical issues along the way. But we don't have to celebrate the outcome and the process, in my mind, of what fueled the Confederacy or the Alamo.
Hey, Joanna. Thank you for joining. Well, good points. Let's see. So we talked about, I wanted to do, let's see, when we get over here, share the screen again, share screen.
Oh, Georgetown. Doc, did he ask for enough?
What was that, Steve?
In your queries, the one we haven't touched on yet is the professor from Georgetown. Did he ask for enough?
Yes, the city of Georgetown. That's what we were talking about before, where they didn't, I may have messed that up, but the intent of
No,
that.
Dr. Trombley. Dr. Trombley.
Oh, yes, we'll get to hers. We're going to get to her actions. This is still the Southern, I'm going to leave this now. This is still the Southern Poverty Center, Law Center. And this is the calls of action. So this is, Joanna, this is the Whose Heritage document. And these were the actions out of that. You know, so Whose Heritage map, and see if there's any that we missed. Let us know if there's any we missed. They actually define what they call a Confederate monument in the document. Support and promote local legislation policies. And I'll tell you, in Georgetown, relative to the monument, I've never considered myself a quitter, but I'm afraid that in Georgetown, the only way the monument will go is if we get new county commissioners. And so that's kind of
Mhm.
where I'm sort of at right now. Sitting out there and getting the petitions is less so to me. But they talk about teaching the history of the Civil War honestly, accurately, and that, so that's kind of the actions out of here.
Well, I have to interrupt because according to our latest salvo from our lieutenant governor, we not only can't talk about racism in K through 12, we now have to get those liberal commie Marxist professors in the colleges and universities to keep them from teaching anything about race and race relations, because critical race theory will destroy us. So teaching history as a former history major is going to be somewhat more complicated if we can't talk about history.
Yeah.
Stick to the Roman and Greeks.
Right, right. Oh, and they never enslaved anybody, that's for sure.
Joanna, did you have something?
I did. It said lost cost instead of lost cause ideology.
Really?
Yeah, it was a typo, I guess. Somebody who was not familiar with the lost cause heard cost.
Oh, there it is up
cause.
there. Look at that. Yes,
Oh, wow, yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
even see that. Wow, good eye. Good catch.
So what to do
Yeah.
about that?
Well, it's a good point. I've been looking at this. Perhaps I should let the Southern Poverty Law Center know that they have this typo that actually
Wow, right in the in action items too.
right in the action items. And I'll tell them we were going over this in our friends meeting today in the email I sent.
Send them a friendly reminder.
There you go.
A friendly edit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to touch on is this document. It sounds like Steve has read it, and that's because we had been talking about this offline a little bit. But I think it's 18 pages. I printed it out so I could. Yeah, and I found it very good. I did find Steve read did she do enough, and I'm gonna leave that question open. But let's go through. We're not going to go through all of this because it's too big, but I'm going to hit some highlights. Steve, could you read that first paragraph, please?
Hang on a second. I got to get something off my screen. The first
Okay.
paragraph. Okay.
Mhm.
November 10th, 1916 was a pleasant fall Friday in Georgetown, Texas, with a clear blue sky and a high of 73 degrees. 51 years after President Lincoln's assassination, the closely knit community had a growing population of 2,871. Southwestern University, founded in 1840. Can somebody put themselves on mute? There's a lot of background noise. Moved to its present location on the eastern side of the town in 1870. Georgetown and the university were halves of a whole, with the 29 faculty and 764 students being active members, civic leaders, and residents of the community. The excitement about the day's event, a statue unveiling before the county courthouse had been building for months. An article published in the Williamson County Sun 2 months prior proclaimed, "This monument should be erected to commemorate for all time the bravery and patriotism of the soldiers of Williamson County who fought for the lost cause more than half a century ago."
Thank you very much. Let's see. Boom. That should put us back. So I'm going to kind of summarize because we're like 2:30 or 2:23 here. So as I go through the document, and thank you for reading that, Steve. There were several speakers there that day. She doesn't talk about she does mention that he spoke. J.P. Buchanan, who was a state representative, actually had some dealings with LBJ later. Somehow they were related. But he had the cornerstone speech, and I have that entire speech. I transcribed it from a source that I had. She didn't talk a lot about that, but she talked about the other speakers. She talked about J.P. Buchanan. She talked about Katie Daffin, who was the president of the United Daughters of Confederacy in Texas. And she went on the Southwestern University the Megaphone had a big article. I've got a copy of that article too. And they let all the students out that day to go attend this. So all the students were there. In fact, they had the Glee Club sang "Tenting on the Old Campground" at the festival. The first person to speak was Williamson County Judge Richard Kreitz, and I'm gonna go ahead and read this to keep us moving. Here's part of what he said. He said, "The purpose of the occasion, more than 50 years after the war, is not to rake up the ashes of the past and rekindle the animosities engendered during the strife, but as true sons and daughters of Confederate soldiers to express anew the love and reverence in which the South will ever hold them." So that's what Judge Gravel's precursor, I shouldn't have said that, but that's the Williamson County judge. Katie Daffin went on, she said, this is kind of some of her words, she said, it is the custom of all countries to build monuments to commemorate important events, honor great deeds, and to mark the progress of civilization. But she quickly added, the purpose was not to keep alive any sectional bitterness, but to honor bravery and patriotism. And then she went on to say the necessity of studying history and keeping a close watch so that no injustice shall be done to the cause so dear every Southern heart. These were words she spoke at the commemoration. And after that, Dr. Trombley says, at the conclusion of her speech, 1,000 school children sang Dixie, which elicited a rebel yell and a prolonged applause as the drapery was drawn, revealing the beautiful marble statue.
Yep.
So those were the words, and I love the fact that Dr. Trombley put those quotes in, because I hear both the county judge, as well as Katie Daffin, apologizing in some degree, recognizing there's something not quite right here. This isn't to bring up all the bad things. What do y'all think? The query is this an apology? Go ahead, Joanna.
This doesn't answer that question. I'm just curious, if all those people came to that and heard that, were there only white people at that event?
Sure.
Were all the school children white? Were all the
Yeah.
students at Georgetown white? Were all the citizens
question.
only the white citizens? Were there no
Yes,
black or
she
brown
talks about that in the
people in Georgetown?
18-page article. It was white people only. The 874
Okay.
black people in town did not come.
Right.
Yes. In fact, let's.
Okay, thank you.
And that's exactly where it's a great segue, Joanna. That was perfect. Let's get over here. That's on page 4. Let's see if I can get it. Oh, I'm way past it. Right here. So, Joanna, do you mind reading right here?
We can't see it. You're not shared.
Oh, good, great point. Sorry.
I'll be happy to read.
There we go. So this is after the discussion of the.
Highlighted?
That's correct.
Okay. What goes unmentioned in the local newspaper stories or the speeches given that November day was any mention of the 599 Black citizens of Georgetown who represented 21% of the population as compared to just 4% today, or their reactions to the ceremony. The first Blacks who arrived in the area in the 1840s were enslaved and worked on farms or ranches and in homes. By 1916, they and their descendants were no longer enslaved, but were subjected to the racial caste system of Jim Crow that legally sustained whites' dominance over Blacks for another 50 years until the Civil Rights movement helped dismantle it. Was there a Black newspaper in town?
Oh, no.
I haven't found one. I subscribed, as I was researching this, to newspapers.com, or one of them, and I found the Troubadour, but I did not find the Black newspaper. So yeah, there was.
Yeah, it occurs to me that the black people probably stayed in their houses all day,
Yeah,
Here.
they would have been afraid.
Yeah.
fearing the violence that might be riled up by this.
Exactly.
It also points out that every Southern heart means only white hearts. We don't have Southern black hearts.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I call this back up just to show, as somebody mentioned, we have up here,
Justice.
we have justice, and down here facing the same direction. I don't know how anybody other than a white person walking in that building today feel like they get justice. But there, so absolutely, yes. I'm glad you asked that question, Joanna, because today the other thing that struck me about this is over time how the population has changed, and
Right.
it does make you wonder
Mhm.
if the sentiment of installing a monument like this, certainly does that have something to do with the decline in the African American population in Georgetown? I suspect it certainly
It's a
fits.
reflection of the
Jim
change.
Crow.
It's an outward indicator of an inward state that the community was in, I would say.
Yes. Well, and let me just mention something about that, because that's a great point. So let me just say, so the decade this was put in, 1910 to 1920, we all know Jim Crow. So right here in this area, 1910, we had Slocum. We had somewhere north of 30, maybe as many as 250 African Americans murdered one night near Palestine, Texas. 1930, 1929, the beginning of the Red Summer in Longview, Texas. So close in basically the same area. Come closer to this, in 1915 to 1916, 4 events occurred. One, Bell County installed a monument. Williamson County installed a monument. Up in Waco, Texas, we lynched Jesse Washington in front of 10,000 white people. 10,000 white people watched Jesse Washington get lynched in Waco, Texas. And then in 1915 also was the release of Birth of a Nation. So just to kind of put this whole period of time in perspective, and how it must have felt to be an African American in Georgetown when this monument went up. And that hurts. I can't even really sense it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Anyway, any other thoughts on that? We'll keep moving along. There's one other piece I don't know how many of you are familiar with, but first off, Williamson County was one of, I believe it was 3. It was a small number of counties that voted against secession. That's exactly right. I think it was 3. It was in that range.
Voted against what?
Against secession.
Oh, okay.
But that said, that doesn't really make us feel that much better as Texans. So let's start reading here. Somebody can read that highlighted part.
I can, if you want, again. In January 1861, the Texas Secession Convention met in Austin, the state capital, and on February 2nd, adopted a declaration of the causes which imperil the state of Texas to secede from the federal union. The document makes it clear that Texas seceded to maintain white supremacy in general and the institution of slavery in particular. Texas was received as a commonwealth, holding, maintaining, and protecting the institution known as Negro slavery, the servitude of the African to the white race within her limits, a relation that had existed from the first settlement of her wilderness by the white race, and which her people intended should exist in all future time. Her institutions and geographical position established the strongest ties between her and other slaveholding states of the Confederacy. We hold as undeniable truths that the governments of the various states and of the Confederacy itself were established exclusively by the white race for themselves and their posterity, that the African race had no agency in their establishment, that they were rightfully held and regarded as an inferior and dependent race, and that condition only could their existence in this country be rendered beneficial or tolerable.
Ouch. Have y'all read that before? Were y'all aware of that?
Mhm.
I mean, that is scary, isn't it?
Something like that is in most of the state secession documents. Almost every one specifically calls out the fact that whites are the ones responsible and the Negro race is inferior and dependent. Almost every single one of the states that seceded made that very explicit in their documents.
It's pretty much amazes me to see that in writing, and you're exactly right, Steve. So she goes on. Let's see. We're getting close here. Let me get back over into the document here. Share screen, and there's just a couple other. Here we go. So so McNeil Marble Company out of Marietta, Georgia, built this, and they built many of these statues. They're all over. In 1916, it cost the city of Georgetown, or the UDC, it cost them, it was between $2,500 and $3,000. The largest single contributor was the Williamson County Commissioners Court, which I have reminded them on occasion of, and Judge Revelle doesn't like it when I remind him of that, but they donated $400, and actually I'm trying to look, because there was a document I saw at one point that said they withheld the right to approve 2 years after the donation, and I have never found where that's been documented, so I'm still trying to find that. If I don't find it, then that may help us. But so a couple things. This was a brochure that they had. They actually went around and they helped these newly formed UDCs, because this was when they were being formed. They went around and showed them how to raise the money. And if you read in the Williamson County Sun, as I have, starting from about 1914 on forward, you can see each week, each month, they're posting who each of the donations came from. Every single one. So the city of Georgetown was also part of it. They donated $200. The main speaker, oh, by the way, he was J.P. Buchanan. He was one of the very earliest donors. He donated $25. But that's McNeil. That $2,500 relates or corresponds to roughly $63,000 today, and I think we could probably raise that money, but not going to do any good. So let's see. So just getting to, I said that, I didn't mean that. It has to be, we have to keep trying and moving the needle forward. And that's certainly what I'm trying to do, move the needle forward. So it talks about here, this is the end of the document. It talks about on Saturday mornings, and this disturbs me. I mean, I don't like walking in downtown Georgetown, going to get my Blue Moon ice cream, and there's people with megaphones yelling at each other. And it doesn't matter to me almost what they're saying. It got pretty divisive. And so I'm helping them less with collecting petitions and more with very much sidelines for that reason, and the pavers. But here's what she says. This is what she concludes with. Is this section. This is the very end of her document, which this is the question that Steve.
Just make it clear that this is the current president of Southwestern University.
Right.
Yes, and I'll tell you, she has my admiration for putting this up. This was good. Now let's read this last one and see if we feel like she really went where she needed to go. And I'll read it. Historical facts and culture are often formidable opponents. In June 2020, a resolution put before the 6-member Georgetown City Council requesting the Williamson County Commissioners Court consider taking action again regarding the monument failed by a 4-2 vote. In December that same year, the 4 Williamson County Commissioners and County Judge approved the creation of a 15-member committee to study the monument. I was there that day. Bowles made the motion, and the only dissenting vote was our county judge. The committee would be tasked to consider options for the monument in case commissioners decide to move it. So just tell us what you think maybe we should do. That was the nature of that committee. To date, the County Commissioners Court has not established a committee. Therefore, as a member of the Georgetown community and the oldest institution of higher learning and of education in Texas, Southwestern University strongly urges the formation of this committee and offers our expertise and assistance. As we were over a century ago, Southwestern and Georgetown still constitute two parts of a whole, and the time has arrived for us to strengthen and renew our union. May we find other icons to venerate, other heroes to praise.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Thoughts on that?
Spoken as a true academic.
That's right, yeah. Form a commission.
Form a commission, yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
the only part of the, I'm sorry.
What hits me is that you take that paragraph about what the statue's about, basically, you know, preserving why we fought, you know, why we fought and why we the secession statement. And you recognize that when we hear when somebody gets up and says, you know, says they're for MAGA or states' rights, or they're part of the Proud Boys or whatever, we hear something that makes us very angry, and that makes us despair. An African American hears sheer fear, and I'm talking about right now. You know, if there are people who are in your accompanying neighborhood who sincerely believe that you are not fit, you know, for the jobs that you are trying to get, then, you know, for the rights that the right to vote, then you have to be incredibly fearful. And I guess that brings it up to date for me, because I've lived my life thinking that, a lot of my life thinking that things really are better, and certainly that they're better in the North. But I've really come to believe that is not the case, and that we have a long way to go in terms of helping people, and that the government of Texas at this point is severely restricting us from doing that in our schools, in our public schools, and that is a crime that they are committing against humanity, particularly against African Americans. But other people of color too, but particularly against African Americans.
I wish in her summation she had said something like, given the historical basis for the events that led to this monument, you know, put that in some kind of context, the urgency for the commission and action. I don't get any sense of urgency. Oh, come on, let's get the commission going. She put all that beforehand. She did a wonderful job of documenting over 8 pages of, you know, how it got to be, how this monument was, you know, they thought it was so special, but it was what a cookie cutter, 270 came out of the factory looking like that, etc. She did a wonderful job in making clear how integral her university was in all that happening. And at the end, she just whisked out and said, we'd like the commission to get started. You know, she should have had more urgency there and more tying it together at the end. You know, it was based on what I just presented to you. The urgency is clear. Get the commission started. The people want action. But she didn't do that. Yeah.
I was kind of the same way. I felt the same way. I felt like, uh, and it may be because I've been involved with it for so long, but it may have been better if she had said, if this is the process we've chosen, then let's move along and do it. But two things. One, you know, the culpability, I'll call it, if that's not too strong a word, of Southwestern University in
Mhm.
that monument is very great.
Yeah.
And in fact, the Sanders division of the UDC is named after, I forget his first name, but he was a faculty member over at Southwestern University.
Sure.
You know, so two things make me glad. One is that she stepped up. Goodness gracious, yes, yay,
Yeah.
yay, yay, yay. And the other thing is the times last year, it was before Delta that I was going out there. One of the things that made me really, really happy was when the Southwestern students were coming out,
Mm.
and they were there, and they were there in force. They were there. There would be 40 of them, and it was
Oh, that's
great to
great.
see. So,
It,
um,
it does seem to me that, in not having read that whole document, that what she's done is focus on the commission and the issues with the Georgetown and Williamson County. What she has not done is step forward, acknowledge, and take steps to really own up to the role that Southwestern.
Oh, yes, she did. Yes,
Oh,
she
she
did.
did? Okay.
Very much so. And she talked about their immense commitment now to broad liberal arts and diversity. And
Yeah.
she quoted the percentages of people that they've recently recruited. And you ought to read the letter. That's
Yeah,
why
that's why I say I hadn't heard it, but she did apologize clearly
Yes.
for that. Good. Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yes, she did.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah.
an amazing letter. That's why at the end it kind of just wussed out.
That's kind of what I was thinking. I thought it
But we
was.
have to recognize that I don't know what the funding source of Southwestern
Oh,
University.
you bet. It's liberal
But
arts.
as
Yeah,
president, she can't force, she can't risk an alumni revolt if they're the ones who foot the bill.
right.
Joanna?
So I saw the top of the article. It evidently was published in the Southwestern University Bulletin.
Yes, it was.
It seems to me,
Go ahead.
I'm just curious if any portion of it, such as just the last paragraph, might go into the newspaper, maybe as a letter to the editor, and also whether she or anybody else from the university had taken it in person and given copies of her article to everybody sitting on the county commission whenever they have their meeting.
Such a good question. I know that it did make it into the Georgetown Sun. I know it's there. I haven't seen it in the Statesman, but it certainly should be brought to the attention. A letter to the editor makes a lot of sense. Let me ponder that. That may be a good discussion too for this coming week with the anti-racism awareness group and/or peace and social concerns, or I may just do it. But I think that's a great point. It needs to be, regardless of how she ended the essay, it's a pretty bold step in Texas that she made, and I really do respect her a lot. There was one other thing I wanted to mention though, and it was something, Liz, you said too, and I agree so much. It's like it feels often as we, each of us individually, are marching down this trail of becoming an anti-racist. It seems like our job is to move the needle a little bit. I mean, if if I could, in a nonviolent manner, and see the monument removed, that would be great. But that's moving the whole clock, not just the needle. And there's times where it slips back, so the 2 steps forward, 1 step back is perhaps in this case, is an unfortunate reality. But there's a gentleman out there that I'm friends with, Jason Norwood. He actually ran for city council in Georgetown. He lives in Georgetown, and I think I've mentioned him before. He's a vet. He went to West Point. He served in Iraq. He's African American, and he told me the story about his daughter and how the first time that he had been called by the N-word, he was in third grade. And just the other day, his daughter came home in first grade, having been called the N-word. And those are the days, and he told me that story. And I mean, I'm sitting, we were out there at the statue, and I mean, that's when somebody was talking about how sometimes your emotion can get wrapped up, back up in anger, and that's when that starts to well up when I think of that happening. But that aside, we've got to keep the faith, as it were, keep moving forward. That's kind of what it's all about.
I just finished an incredible book that was written by a Quaker. Her name is Wendy Sanford, and the book is These Walls Between Us.
Would you repeat that, Liz? I couldn't hear.
The author is Wendy Sanford, and the name of the book is These Walls Between Us. And there is at least one copy in the Boston Public Library. She's a friend of mine, and has been since I was a member of Cambridge meeting many years ago. She's a lesbian, and she was one of the people who, one of the writers of Our Bodies, Ourselves, way back there, and has had not a writing career so much as a feminist career, I guess is the word. But she writes about her friendship, or her sort of friendship. She writes about her friendship with a woman who came to be their maid in the summers on Martha's Vineyard, her family's maid on Martha's Vineyard when that woman was 15 and Wendy was 11. And the friendship that grew up between them. The woman came from part of Virginia, Western Virginia, where she had grown up in a rural area. It's a fascinating story. They're both still alive. It's taken her a long time to write this book. But the major message is that she had no idea of what that woman was experiencing in many different contexts of their lives. And for me, it was, her family was very wealthy. And, my family wasn't. But, there's just so many, as a white woman of about the same age, there's just a whole lot of parallels. And so I think it's a book that's really worth, and as a white man, you'll have some of those parallels too. This is with somebody who really is, thanks for putting in the chat, incidentally, who really is one of us, who has all of the same convictions that we do and worships the way we do, all of that. So I just want to tell you about that. It's really affected me a lot, in a very positive way too, because I think that by hearing her experience, I can go back and go forward with my relationships with people in a different way. So it's always hard to stand in somebody else's shoes, but it's particularly hard. This is a breach that's particularly hard for most white Americans.
And that breach explains so much. That breach explains so much. I mean, we don't know what it's like to look in the rearview mirror and see police car lights and fear for your life. I mean, we just don't know these things, and we can read about them. But you're so right. I mean, thank you for that. Joanna,
And
yes.
it's something I have to say that I wish my African American friends when I was younger had shared with me, but they couldn't. And I understand why. But the more that we open ourselves up to that sharing, I think the better off we are. It's difficult though. And it's more difficult for them than it is for us. It's much more scary for them than it is for us. So.
Well, it is, and I think we bear an awful lot of responsibility there. In other words, I think I realized not a long time ago, in the last year or two, that, if I expected my few African American friends to help me understand, then that's not right. It's up to me to listen, and learn. So yeah, it's a balance. But yes, I'll send out the links. I put them in an email. I'll try to get everybody here. Zach, I don't have your email though. Can some?
Actually, not Zach, is it? Who's been listening?
Zach was in the background.
Yeah, he came
Zach
and
was
went.
in the background.
There he is.
Hey.
Hi.
The three of us have been kind of rotating because we were like eating and preparing lunch, but we heard almost everything, the three of us. But no, but Zach's been listening. He's got to go now because I think one of his friends wants him to play basketball or something.
Yeah. Well,
Right,
congratulations,
he's got a
Zach.
life go.
Congratulations. In the meantime, you're getting into a couple of schools, right? Couple of colleges?
Yes, I got into Swarthmore, so I'm very happy.
Wow! Congratulations. That's not easy. Boy, Zach, that's something.
Yeah.
That's huge. So now
Yeah.
you have to make a decision?
What's that?
Do you have to make a decision?
Yeah, so I did an early decision agreement, and since I got in, it was binding, so I did accept there.
Oh, so you're going to Swarthmore.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the thing that we've been wrestling with as a family, because if he doesn't accept, it is kind of a bad thing on his integrity. But at the same time, we're waiting to see. It's not a full ride or anything, so we have to see what the financial aid is for.
Oh,
that.
sure.
So I hope that, I know this is a first world problem. It's not like, I call it a first world problem because many of my relatives are struggling with like water. So,
Yeah.
but I hope that you all can pray with, or think of us, because we are kind of struggling with this decision. I know he's happy. I think Zach is not struggling. I think his parents are struggling with this decision.
Understand.
That's usually the case when it comes to
There
college.
is a fund in our yearly meeting. There's a fund in our yearly meeting that gives for education, for Quaker education. Did you hear it? Did your dad hear that? And an application can be made in that fund.
Yeah,
I didn't hear that. Would you repeat that, Liz?
There is a fund in our yearly meeting that gives to Quaker education, for educating Quaker kids, but particularly at Quaker schools. And so, and membership has never been an issue in our yearly meeting.
There you go.
Formal membership in the society. And Joanna's on the committee, the Ministry and Care Committee that administers that fund. And so I want to encourage you publicly here to apply for that if there's need for funds, because that could help you go to a
It might be a simple gift, but it might help a little.
Yeah, it won't be massive amounts, but
I mean, they gave
there's enough in that fund to make it.
they gave Zach a good, some convincing money. It's just a question of,
Or what are the other schools?
it's
doing?
just a question of he felt pressured to give them a response so soon. They only gave him a week. So that was.
That's called marketing.
They
Yes.
only gave-
That's what when you apply for that early admission, that's the deal.
Yeah, I know. So that's the kind of, dilemma, because it would have been nice to hear back from some of the other schools, but again,
Right.
it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Well,
You're wrong. Anyway,
yeah, the other thing is that you really were led to Swarthmore. I mean, you know, it really was the school you wanted to go to. So
Yeah,
there's
it was.
integrity in accepting too.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I didn't mean to sidetrack the whole
No,
conversation.
good luck. with
No,
it.
this is
Yeah.
important.
That's good news
We're
to hear
with
that.
you.
That's wonderful, yeah.
Yeah, and have a wonderful visit. You're going in spring break, right?
Well,
So about that, I
this is your decision. You get to talk to them.
yeah, I'm on the hot seat again. I encouraged Zach to change that to a virtual because
Okay.
because Lulu wanted to go and I wanted to go, and we thought that if he's going to wind up going to Swarthmore, it'd be better to go in August when he's ready to move in.
Right.
That's kind of the
The
logic.
money. Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
That makes sense. Okay.
So, yeah. That's what.
yeah, that's when you really want to be there, for sure.
Yeah. So
I would go
I
in
don't know.
May. I would go in May. The whole campus is in bloom. It's spectacular.
Yeah. That's what we heard. We heard the October.
Dogwoods,
Yeah.
crab apples, roses. It's just spectacular.
So again, I encourage Zach to go by himself. That's still on the table.
There you go.
There by himself. He's old enough. He's 17. So
Yeah, yeah.
yes.
Well,
And there are
in-
people on the other side who would take care of him. So
And
tell
so
you.
I'm going to say that in addition to what Liz mentioned about the yearly meeting, South Central yearly meeting, there is a fund in our monthly meeting that is specifically the Schinder Fund, right? It
Hmm.
still exists. That's
That's right.
specifically for travel and education.
For travel, yeah.
okay, that's good to know too. Yeah.
right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for all that information.
Well, we're glad to hear your success, Zach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best thing. That's the best.
Hey, you got into University of Southern California and College of William and Mary. You got into another one called the Plant 2 Honors here at UT Austin. So
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
very tough decision because a lot of these like Plant 2 is really seemed like a really good fit as well. But
It is.
again, these are I call them first world problems.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
No doubt about that.
Well, we support you.
Yeah, whatever you decide.
Yeah.
We'll support you.
I just wanted to piggyback on Liz's. I posted in the chat over the past month. I've read Isabel Wilkinson's book called Cast.
Yeah.
Or I'm sure many of you have
Yeah,
already.
I've read that.
But if you haven't, definitely worth reading because she makes the very clear analogy beyond racism
Mhm.
to caste in India and caste in South Africa and caste in
Right.
Hitler's Germany, in the sense that you find a characteristic and you build a stratification that goes across all aspects of your culture. And she talks about it very,
And
very
in
well.
and in America, we don't believe in castes. We just
Right.
live them.
Right, yeah.
Right.
We look down on people who have caste, and yet we have a very clear caste system. So
Yeah,
that's why I thought
yeah.
it's definitely worth reading.
That is, and it's well written too. I
Very
found
well
it.
written.
I
Wow.
found it easy to, there was
I
discrete
know.
stopping points that made it very easy to continue
Well, she's a
through.
journalist. She's a journalist.
Ah,
And it shows. It's
Yeah,
very
her
well
first book
written and
is
moves on.
wonderful too.
Yeah, the warmth of other suns, I
Love
think.
that.
Yeah, that's the other one,
that's
right?
right.
I'm reading right now South to America, which is written by a young African American woman. Let me just get her name. So,
South to America.
Imani Perry, South to America. It's about her trip to the South, basically.
Ah,
Hmm.
a journey
So,
below the
You
Mason-Dixon
know,
line.
Hmm.
it's different,
Hmm.
a different view. There are so many good books at this point. They're
Oh, yeah.
amazing. That I've heard her speak. I'm just at the beginning of the book, so I can't speak for it. But it seems like a really good
And
book.
if you're interested in books along those lines, I think is it the Black Pearl bookstore over there on, yeah, that's a good place to get them because you're supporting a black-owned
Right.
bookstore.
They've moved on to Burnett Road, by the way.
Yeah, Burnett Road, yeah,
Black-
behind the 10,000 Village
No, they're
store
not on
within.
the, no, they moved out of there, Tobin.
Oh,
They're no
where-
longer
where
in
else?
the 10,000 villages. They have their own place now near where the Mazda dealer is. Or is that Burnett? Yeah, Burnett Road. Yeah. They're
Mazda,
further
okay.
up. I have to look them up. They just moved about 3 weeks ago.
Okay, good.
But
Good
yeah,
to know.
that's a store where you could go in and it's owned and operated by Black people. You can browse. They've got a lot of these books there, and they got a lot of other books too, obviously.
Hmm.
Yeah,
It's the Pearl?
Black Pearl,
Black
Black
Pearl.
Pearl.
Mhm. Really nice bookstore, yeah.
Thank you. I didn't know about that.
All right, well, any other comments or thoughts on
Thank you.
closing?
Thank you.
Thank you,
Jim.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of good information. The secession thing is so blatant. I'm going to keep that one
Yeah.
for later reference.
That's one of
Yes.
the ironies, you know, our state board of education has passed something that says you can only teach the Civil War through the primary documents. And all kinds of educators put that up right away and said, here you go, we're going to be
Yeah.
teaching this in the classroom then.
That's
Right
good.
here.
Yeah, right.
Amazing.
But we can't make anybody feel uncomfortable. That's illegal.
Right.
Except for the black people that we can make feel really uncomfortable. That's okay.
Right.
And have been doing a successful job for years, yes.
Man, that's the blatant part to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
How
thanks a
How
lot,
much
Jeff.
did-